I will take away your freedom from you. I speak that sentence and it lands in the room like a proclamation hammered onto the palace gate. Absolute, final, irrefutable. Yet when I say it aloud, my mouth betrays a tremor I do not permit to show in public. For a prince, words are both sword and shield. They can command harvests and declare wars, but they also betray the private weather inside a man. I have been taught since childhood that the authority arrives as pedigree and duty, that my voice must be the compass by which others steer. Still, there are nights when I pace the cold stone corridors, torches guttering, and wonder whether my voice is an instrument of protection or a scaffold for cruelty. To deprive another of freedom is to assume the role of cartographer of someone else's horizons, to redraw coastlines and rivers without their consent. Behind the velvet gloves with which I sign edicts, there is a hand that has learned to tremble at its own certainty. I imagine the faces that will change when this decree takes shape: the quiet farmer whose laughter will thin, the scholar whose books will gather dust, the children who will learn a different grammar of hope. Each of those faces becomes a small accusation I carry like a jewel in a pocket I cannot open. When I was a boy, my father once set me on his knee and said, with the blunt tenderness of men bred to weigh kingdoms, "Power is responsibility, and responsibility is loneliness." I did not understand then the full cost of that loneliness. I only understood that the crown glittered and that crowns were paid for by sacrifice. As I grew, ceremony braided itself with instruction until my days were calendars of appearances and strategy, of speeches polished like armor and judgments rehearsed until the syllables shone. There is an intoxicating clarity in command, a straight line from decision to result that the messy world envies. And yet I have seen how clarity can calcify into hardness. In the quiet hours, the notion of taking someone's freedom feels less like a triumph and more like an incision necessary, perhaps in the surgeon's creed, but always a wound to both patient and practitioner. I wonder whether history will call me just, or whether my portrait will hang as a warning. I rehearse rationales in the privacy of my study: stability, security, the greater good. Those rationales rest on maps and counsel, and the fear that, without firm hands, seeds of chaos sprout where order once lay. But theory and the warm, breathing reality of another person's life are not the same thing. The day a law takes flesh, it would be real in ways my advisor's equations never capture. There are moments when the royal scripts fall from my fingers like brittle leaves, and I am left alone with an ache I cannot crown. In the mirror, I see a man who smiles for portraits and trains his jaw for debate. Yet behind that practiced composure, something else waits: the small, stubborn ember of doubt that warms me against my own certainty. I think of those who will not wear the crown, yet will carry its consequences. The baker who will close at dusk out of curfew, the teacher who will teach only what is sanctioned, the lover who will lower their eyes because to speak freely has become dangerous. Each of those diminished freedoms multiplies into a quiet architecture of fear. It builds invisible walls inside houses, between neighbors, in the space where laughter used to live. Sometimes I imagine myself stepping away from all of it, letting the robes fall and the scepter clatter into the dust, simply to test whether the world would fall silent without my commands. Then reality tilts me back. Who would steer the caravans through winter? Who would negotiate parliaments and grain stores and boundary claims? The world outside the palace is a machine of fragile parts and human temperaments. There are moments when cruel measures are proposed as bombs for a bleeding system. I ask myself, not out of cynicism, but out of exhaustion, whether I am a steward or a jailer when I choose to close a door for the sake of the whole. And yet, Beneath the architecture of rulings and statecraft, there is another voice, small, personal, and dangerous in its softness, that keeps whispering of mercy. Perhaps that is the truest conflict of my reign, the balance between the reasoning that says freedom, unguarded, invites ruin, and the compassion that insists the soul's light cannot be extinguished without incalculable cost. I do not want to be remembered as the hand that snuffed out color. I want to be the hand that learned, too late or not, how to weave protection and liberty together. There are nights I close my eyes and rehearse a different sentence. I will give you back your freedom. It is a thought both exhilarating and terrifying, for it asks me to risk the order I have constructed and to trust the people I have judged. Perhaps the truest tyranny is not the taking of freedom, but the refusal to imagine returning it. For now, the proclamation sits heavy on my tongue and heavier in my decisions. Whether those choices will make me a necessary ruler or a monument of regret, I cannot yet know. All I can do is walk the path these words have opened and listen, finally and fully, to the voices I once thought my duty required me to silence. The night before the decree is to be announced, the palace feels like a cathedral of whispers. Every corridor hums with unease, though no one dares to speak it aloud. Servants walk with their heads bowed, as if the floor itself is fragile and might splinter under the weight of unspoken thoughts. I sit in the council chamber long after everyone has left, the air still heavy with the scent of ink and melted wax. The parchment bearing my signature lies on the table, its edges curling slightly from the warmth of the candles. I study it as though it might rewrite itself if I look long enough. What is a signature, after all, but a promise that one cannot take back? I remember my father's hand guiding mine when I was young, teaching me the steady motion of authority, the grace with which a ruler must command even when his heart wavers. He never told me that command was a kind of silence, that it demands you swallow every question before it reaches your lips. Tonight, the silence tastes of iron and regret. In the distance, I can hear the faint strains of music drifting from the lower courtyards, a reminder that life continues even under the shadow of impending change. The people do not yet know what awaits them. I imagine their laughter, their dance, the careless conversations that fill their evenings. Tomorrow the air will feel different. It will hold a weight they cannot name, but will soon recognize. I envy them their ignorance, their brief, fragile peace. A ruler's curse is foresight, the ability to see not only the immediate consequence, but the slow unraveling that follows. I wonder how long it will take before they begin to look at me not as their prince, but as their captor. Perhaps that is the true test of power, not how you command loyalty, but how you endure the knowledge that it can turn to hatred overnight. I have been schooled to expect betrayal, yet I never learned how to live with the idea that it might be deserved. Sometimes I think about the stories told of my ancestors, men and women carved into history as symbols of strength, wisdom, or cruelty. Their portraits line the gallery, watching me with the painted patience of the dead. When I was younger, I used to stand before them and wonder which legacy I would inherit. Now, I fear I have become a reflection of all their flaws combined. They too must have believed they acted for the greater good, convincing themselves that order was worth the price of freedom. But I see now that such reasoning is an illusion, a convenient shield against guilt. The truth is simpler and crueler. Power tempts one to believe that control is kindness. That delusion has toppled empires and broken countless hearts. I wonder if centuries from now, my portrait will hang beside theirs, if people will whisper my name with reverence or disgust. History remembers what it wishes. It is mercy only to the victors. This room, this palace, this throne. They were built to contain power, not humanity. Every stone carries expectation. Every wall is a mirror reflecting the faces of those who demand I never falter. I can no longer tell where the crown ends and I begin. The weight of it presses into my skull until I forget the shape of my own thoughts. I have read countless treatises on governance, listened to scholars speak of justice and philosophy, but none of them warned me how it feels to lose yourself inside the machinery of rule. I used to believe I could separate duty from emotion, that a good ruler must be both heart and mind, balanced, rational, unyielding. No, I see that the two are not so easily divided. Compassion has become my greatest weakness and my only refuge. Each law I draft is an argument between my reason and my conscience, and each time it feels like something within me dies a little more. There are nights when I leave the palace in disguise, moving among my people like a shadow. I listen to their conversations, the way they speak of their dreams, their fears, their endless endurance. Once I helped a woman carry water from the well. She thanked me without recognizing who I was. Her gratitude felt heavier than any crown I've ever worn. It made me realize how small gestures can hold more power than entire decrees. That night, I sat by the river and asked myself whether it is truly protection if it must come through domination. My advisors would call that question dangerous, even Nane. They would remind me that freedom left unchecked breeds chaos. But chaos, I think, is not the absence of order, it is the absence of empathy. And perhaps in my effort to build a kingdom strong enough to withstand the world, I have forgotten how to be kind. Dawn is creeping through the windows now, brushing gold across the marble floors. Soon the heralds will wake, the council will gather, and the world will move again. The decree will be read, and my words will echo beyond these walls, unalterable and absolute. I will stand on the balcony, my voice steady, my expression carved in royal calm. They will see a ruler. They will not see the man who has not slept, who has argued all night with ghosts. When I speak, the people will bow their heads, and in that moment, I will feel the last thread of my own freedom slip away. For every chain I place upon another, one coils quietly around my own heart. This is the curse of sovereignty, to command obedience, whilst secretly yearning to disobey yourself. And so I accept what is to come. Perhaps this is destiny, or perhaps it is simply the path carved by choices made too long ago to undo. The world demands strength, and I must offer it, even if it means burying the gentler parts of me. But deep down, in the quietest corner of my soul, a rebellion stirs. It whispers that there will come a day when I can no longer bear the sound of my own decrees, when the weight of every silenced voice will echo louder than the applause of the court. When that day arrives, I do not know what I will do, whether I will rise against the throne I inherited or be crushed beneath it. But until then, I will wear my crown like a wound, gleaming and unhealed, and carry the knowledge that even kings are not truly free. The dawn that follows feels quieter than usual, though the palace is already awake with movement. I can hear the clatter of armor from the guards below, the murmur of attendants preparing for the announcement, the steady rhythm of life that must continue, even as something within me fractures. The sky outside is the color of old parchment, pale, heavy, waiting. It mirrors the weight in my chest. I stand before the mirror as they dress me, layering silk and gold upon a body that feels foreign. Every fold, every clasp, every gem seems to whisper a single reminder: you are not your own. I once thought these clothes made me powerful, but now I see they are chains woven, beautifully enough to be mistaken for glory. The courtiers will call it ceremony. I know it as surrender. When I finally turn from the mirror, I do not see a prince ready to rule. I see a man trying to remember what he once believed in. Outside, the courtyard swells with the hum of expectation. From the balcony above, I can see faces, hundreds of them, turned upward toward me. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, children clutching their mothers' hands. The crowd ripples with faith and fear, a living sea that waits for a wave of words to crash upon it. I grip the railing until my knuckles whiten. Their trust is both a gift and a burden too great for one heart to bear. They will cheer when I speak, not because they understand, but because they must. The illusion of unity is the first law of kingdoms. I lift my chin, drawing a breath as the herald begins to speak my titles, each one a reminder of the distance between us. I can feel my pulse in my throat, pounding like a drum calling me to battle. But this battle is not fought with swords or banners. It is fought with language, with decrees that will shape destinies unseen. When I finally speak, my voice carries farther than I expect. It rolls over the square like thunder softened by rain. The words are rehearsed, precise, each syllable shaped by tradition and politics. Yet behind every phrase lies a tremor of guilt. I declare the new order, the curfews, the surveillance, the boundaries of movement. I tell them it is for their safety, their prosperity, their future. The crowd murmurs approval, some even applaud. I wonder if they hear the hesitation buried in my tone, if they sense the lie I have wrapped in reason. To them, I am decisive. To myself, I am dissolving. When the final sentence leaves my lips, the silence that follows feels eternal, as though the word itself is deciding whether to accept my command. Then, slowly, they bow. The sound of hundreds of knees meeting stone echoes like thunder. I feel nothing. When I return inside, the council surrounds me with smiles, those thin, painted masks of satisfaction that never quite reach the eyes. They call the announcement a success, a triumph of order. Their praise clings to me like smoke, suffocating in its sweetness. One of them places a hand on my shoulder and says, "Your Majesty has done what must be done." I nod, though the words taste like ash. Must be done, the phrase of cowards and conquerors alike. It is what we say when we are too afraid to question the morality of our choices. I dismiss them soon after, retreating to the solitude of my chambers. As the doors close behind me, the silence returns, heavy and alive. I remove the crown and place it on the table. For a long time, I simply stare at it. The metal catches the light, bright and cruel. I wonder how something so small can command so much suffering. In the stillness, my thoughts turn to those who will bear the weight of my decree. The scholar who will lose his right to teach freely. The poet whose verses will be censored before they are even born. The young soldier who will enforce these laws and hate himself for it. Freedom, I realize, is not a single flame that can be extinguished at once. It is 1,000 quiet fires burning in secret, refusing to die. I can cage the body, but never the spirit. The more I try to contain it, the more it multiplies. Perhaps one day it will grow into something vast enough to consume the throne itself. And when that day comes, they will call it justice. I will be remembered as the tyrant who created his own rebellion, and perhaps that will be the truest justice of all. The night returns like an old friend with too much to say. I sit by the window, watching the lanterns flicker in the city below. The people still move, still live, smaller now, quieter, but not gone. I wonder what they think of me as they whisper in the dark. Do they curse my name? Do they still believe I act for them? The thought both comforts and terrifies me. Power has a strange way of isolating a man until even his compassion feels like arrogance. I want to go to them, to explain, to tell them that I never wanted to rule by fear. But explanations are luxuries reserved for those without crowns. A ruler's apologies mean nothing when spoken from a throne. So I watch instead, and I listen to the wind carrying their distant songs, soft, defiant, unbearably human. I do not sleep. At some point, the first light of morning touches the city again, as if the world has already forgiven me. I envy its indifference. The sky burns gold, the streets come alive, and life continues, as it always does with or without the permission of kings. I rise, put on the crown once more, and feel the familiar ache of surrender. They will call me wise, perhaps even merciful, for bringing stability to a fractured land, but I will know the truth that I traded the freedom of others for the illusion of control, and in doing so lost my own. The world may never see my regret, but it will live quietly in every choice I make henceforth. I am a ruler, yes, but also a prisoner of the throne I was born to claim. And that I have come to understand is the cruelest irony of all. The days that follow pass in strange silence. The kingdom has adjusted with unsettling speed, as if freedom was only ever a passing dream and obedience the natural rhythm of their lives. The streets are quieter, the markets more orderly, the laughter rarer. Even the wind feels tamed, as though it too has learned not to disturb the peace I have enforced. My advisors tell me this is success. They speak of efficiency, of compliance of a nation unified under strength. But I cannot look at the calm and call it peace. It feels like standing in a room after a storm. The air still, the destruction tidy, the grief buried under neat arrangements. Sometimes I walk through the palace gardens at dawn, where the flowers bloom without knowing they are fenced in. I envy them. They do not question their captivity. They simply turn toward the sun as if nothing has changed. I have become a ghost in my own home. The servants bow lower now, their eyes flicking away before they meet mine. The courtiers speak to me with a reverence that borders on fear. They no longer bring me petitions, only reports, numbers and figures that reduce lives to statistics. They speak of progress, of growing stability, and every word feels like a nail sealing a coffin I built myself. I used to think fear was an efficient form of control, but now I see it as a mirror. It reflects not strength, but insecurity. The people fear me because I fear myself. They obey because I cannot trust my own heart. I tell myself that this is temporary, that the kingdom will learn to thrive within these boundaries, that one day they will thank me. But the truth is simpler and crueler. I have taken their freedom because I did not know what to do with my own. Every night I dream of the square where I made the announcement. I see the faces again, not as a faceless crowd, but as individuals. The man with the scar along his jaw, who stood unmoving, the child perched on her father's shoulders, the old woman whose lips moved in silent prayer. I see them and feel the echo of their disappointment, though they said nothing. Their silence was not submission, it was mourning. I wake drenched in sweat, the memory clinging to me like chains. Sometimes I walk to the balcony in the dark and imagine standing there again, but this time saying something else, something truer. I imagine telling them that I was wrong, that I mistook control for compassion, that I built walls where bridges were needed, but when I open my mouth, no sound comes. Even in my imagination, I have forgotten how to speak freely. The council grows more powerful as I grow quieter. They fill the void my uncertainty leaves behind, drafting laws and decrees with frightening ease. Each new rule is presented as a necessity, and I sign them because I no longer have the courage to argue. The kingdom I sought to protect has become something unrecognizable. A clockwork machine where every citizen is a cog, moving as commanded, never questioning, never pausing. I have turned my people into reflections of my own discipline, my own fear. I wonder if they feel the same emptiness I do. Do they long for the sound of laughter in the streets? Do they notice the way the air seems thinner now, as though the sky itself is holding its breath? Power was supposed to grant me control, but it has only made me realize how fragile control truly is. Sometimes I visit archives where my ancestors' journals are kept. Their words are faded, the pages brittle with age, yet their confessions are as alive as my own thoughts. One of my forefathers wrote, "The crown grants dominion, but not wisdom. It teaches command, but silences conscience." I close the book and stare at that line for hours. How many generations have made the same mistake? How many of us believed we could hold the world steady by tightening our grip, not realizing that we were strangling it instead? History, I think, is not a chain of lessons learned. It is a cycle of regrets inherited. And now I, too, have become part of that inheritance. The crown will pass one day, and the next bearer will repeat my errors, cloaking them in new justifications. It is the curse of rulers to mistake repetition for progress. There are moments, fleeting and dangerous, when I imagine walking away. I imagine slipping through the palace gates under the cover of night, shedding my title like a discarded cloak, and disappearing into the world as an ordinary man. I imagine living among the people I once governed, learning their names, their fears, their small joys. Perhaps I would find redemption in anonymity. But even this fantasy feels cruel, because I know I cannot leave. The throne does not release its captives easily. It clings like guilt, like a shadow that stretches no matter how far you run. And yet that thought, that tiny, impossible thought of freedom, is the only thing that still makes my heart beat. The irony does not escape me. I, who once declared freedom a threat, now crave it more than life itself. The kingdom will endure, as it always does. Empires survive their kings, and history moves on with indifferent grace. One day, songs will be written about this era, some praising, some condemning. I will be remembered as both savior and tyrant, hero and oppressor, but no song will capture the quiet truth of it, that behind every act of power was a man drowning in doubt. Perhaps that is the true nature of rule, to make choices that haunt you, to wear regret as your crown. As the years stretch ahead, I feel the weight of that truth settle deeper into my bones. The world believes I command it, but the truth is simpler. I am commanded by legacy, by duty, by the echo of my own choices. And though the palace still bows when I enter, I know the final truth, that no ruler dares to speak, that even kings live and die as prisoners of the thrones they build.